Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Jason.
We have altered our schedule a little bit this week.
Yeah, it's Wednesday night, which is not our usual recording time, but I'm doing well. It's been a busy day. Had to drive up to the deep northeast because we bought something on Facebook Marketplace, and I very unwisely chose to leave at 4 p.m., which meant that I did not get back home until, it was after 6. So I was questioning my decision when I was sitting on Deerfoot Trail at 4:30. But other than that, I'm doing well. How about you?
Everything's going pretty good. It's a bit of a tight week for me. We're recording a little bit earlier to sort of accommodate some of my traveling schedule here. But overall, it's good, and I'm kind of looking forward to talking about the big match this weekend.
Yeah, it's unfortunate you're not going to be able to watch it in person, but you've got a great reason to be missing it. Vacation booked. It's a really exciting weekend coming up here in Calgary, and I'm excited to talk about that as well as some other stuff today.
If you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, would you tell us, as you have done 75 times before, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So the YYC Soccer Podcast is a podcast that focuses on soccer with a specifically Calgary-centric lens. So we talk about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We discuss the teams and players from Calgary's soccer community, whether that's grassroots and amateur leagues, all the way up to the post-secondary and professional teams.
This week, our first topic is going to be the big championship matchup this upcoming weekend at Spruce Meadows. We have Cavalry FC facing Forge FC for the playoff title. And we'll also talk about some post-secondary action, about Mount Royal Cougars men's, Dinos women. We'll also talk about what's going on with a couple of NCAA teams that we follow with a lot of Calgary connections. We'll also talk about some wild news and a couple other notes from SAIT, and we'll get to all that in the end. But we also have an interview this week. Who's our interview with, Scott?
Yeah, it's kind of funny to say that we've never had this player on our podcast before, but earlier this week, you and I had a good chat with Marco Carducci, Cavalry FC's goalkeeper and captain. We've included some, audio clips of him speaking in press conferences and things like that in the past, but we've never actually had him on the podcast. So it was really nice to talk to him about his 6 years with Cavalry, what this upcoming game means both to him as well as to the team, and lots of other topics. So excited to run that interview.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. Let's get to it, and let's start talking about the big championship matchup this weekend.
This is Marco Carducci, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So Cavalry didn't play last weekend. Of course, they had qualified for the CPL final the weekend before by beating Forge. So last weekend, we got to watch Forge versus Atletico Ottawa to see which team would be taking on Cavalry this Saturday. And shouldn't be surprised, it's Forge again. They beat Atletico Ottawa 1-0 to advance to Saturday's CPL championship game.
Yeah, they always seem to find a way, don't they?
They do. I don't know how they did it. I mean, Forge is actually, they really limped toward the finish line of the CPL regular season. Even though they finished first, they didn't get a lot of points in their last couple of games, and they actually went the last 3 games of the season without scoring. And that scoreless run continued into the playoffs when they lost 1-0 to Cavalry. So taking on Ottawa, they had been in a bit of a slump, yet in the second half, they got that all-important goal, and then they were able to hold on from that point forward to book their berth in the important game. It's Forge season, isn't it? They always find a way during the playoffs.
When you compare these two teams, I think you look at the record and you look at how many points Cavalry has gained over the last, half dozen games. They've pretty much been perfect, and Forge has been far from that. So it is definitely a situation where Cavalry is the hotter team going in. But as we've already established, I don't know, all bets are off when it comes to Forge. They always seem to figure out a way to stay in it.
Yeah, it's interesting that they always peak during the playoffs. And Cavalry's kind of been the opposite, whereas they've faltered in the postseason. But no, they're absolutely the more informed team, as you mentioned. They've won their last 4 games straight, unbeaten in their last 7. They haven't lost actually since early September when Forge beat them 2-1. It seems like, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. has really found the starting 11 and the formation that he's happy with. He tinkered with the lineup pretty much every game this season, all the way up until the last couple, and he's finally starting to show some consistency with who's playing where. So I imagine he's going to go with he's going to go with what works, and we're going to see a very similar, if not the exact same, lineup for Cavalry that we've seen in the last couple of games with that 4-2-3-1 formation. So, it's the same final as last year and a repeat of the 2019 inaugural final, which was the last time that Spruce Meadows hosted it. Really excited for this Saturday, Jason. It's going to be a sellout crowd of probably 6,000 people. And it just seems like, the atmosphere and the support behind the team is pretty palpable. I was at City Hall today for work reasons and noticed that there was a Cavalry banner hung from the building. And, it's nice to see that the municipality, the municipal government is getting behind the team.
Cavalry is going to have some kind of, I don't know what it's, a fan viewing festival. Like at Spruce Meadows, they're going to have these big screens set up. And so if you weren't able to get a ticket to the game, you can go to this event. So I think that kind of shows you the kind of buzz and the kind of interest. I always think of, those kind of events as happening, in my mind, I always think of like the Raptors games where they were in the playoffs on their championship run and there were like thousands of people outside the stadium. This is kind of the same concept. They've got buzz to it and that sort of thing. So Cavalry's done a really good job of building the fan base. Sometimes it's been a bit of a gradual growth, but I think, this year we've definitely seen things go to take some next steps, but this final, I think it started to cross over much more into the mainstream. I think there's more awareness of what's going on this week.
It definitely seems like that. And I think we saw yet again, Cavalry's home attendances were higher this year than they were in 2023, which was a record. I think they were averaging around, was it 4,200 or 4,400 fans a game? And if, this is an exciting game on Saturday, and if Cavalry managed to come out on top, that's really going to bode well for next year. I imagine you'll see some new season ticket holders.
For sure. And then, by the way, I would have a feeling most of our listeners are already aware of this, but if you aren't able to make it out to the match, this match is obviously on One Soccer like it always is, but it will be broadcast live on CBC. So, that will enable this game to reach a whole new set of people. It's a opportunity for some people who have never really seen Cavalry to see them on TV.
Definitely. So before we run our interview with Marco, I just wanted to repeat some stuff that we've already mentioned in previous episodes, but I felt it was worth repeating. It's just kind of like a head-to-head comparing Forge and Cavalry, because dating back 6 years now, 30 plus games, remarkably, these two teams have only once had a result that the spread was more than one goal. Like these two teams almost always, it's either 1-0, 2-1, 1-1, 0-0. There's only been one game where these two teams, where they weren't like neck and neck, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that was the match. Was it last year at Spruce Meadows when Cavalry won like 3-0? Was it because I think you had mentioned that earlier, previously to me. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a Friday night game under the floodlights, and Cavalry ran rampant that game. But that has been the exception to the rule when these two teams play. So, it's a really hard game to predict in terms of who's going to win for a lot of reasons we've already kind of cited. But Forge has been the best playoff team. Cavalry is the more informed team, but throughout the regular season, Forge did finish in first place. They overcame Cavalry. They beat Cavalry twice, whereas Cavalry only won once, and then the other game between them was a draw. But Cavalry beat Forge in the playoffs for the first time just 2 weekends ago, and that was their first win at Tim Hortons Field since 2021. So they're feeling confident heading into Saturday. That's for sure.
Let's run our interview now with Marco Carducci, and we'll chat more after the interview.
We would like to welcome Marco Carducci to the podcast this week. It seems hard to believe that we're on our 76th episode, and we haven't had Marco on as a guest until this week. So we're really glad to have him. As I'm sure most listeners are aware, Marco is the starting goalkeeper for Cavalry FC, and he's been with the club since day one. Welcome to the podcast, Marco.
Thanks for having me.
I'll start by asking about the season and the path before. So it's familiar, but maybe this year felt a little different for you guys.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It certainly was a bit different. Look back, and as you'd mentioned in the intro, I've been here since day one, so I'm obviously very familiar with the history. We needed to be resilient this year. It was certainly much more of a roller coaster, I'd say, and I think for us it was more that challenge of continuing to stay with the pack and turning those draws into wins, because obviously there were a lot of those early on. This back half of the season, especially, we stuck to those principles. We stuck to that we wanted to play, and the results came. So a different challenge for sure, but we're obviously really excited to be competing for another trophy.
After the slow start with all the draws, was there a match or a moment in the season where you really felt like it was coming together? Like, last year there was, the last minute win in Ottawa or the 3-0 home win against Forge. And those kind of felt like catalyst victories. Is there anything you can sort of comment about this year?
Those are really great examples, because we did go through something similar last year. I think there were maybe a couple. I'm looking back earlier in the summer, we had a couple good results, but then we weren't able to string many together. So really for us, it was really a matter of just stringing some of those games together. But after that, I think we picked up 15 points out of 15. And that was a key moment for us to really stride forward. And then from that point on, I think we found that consistency.
So we're into championship week, I guess you could call it. We're talking on Monday. So is there anything that you and the rest of your teammates will do differently to prepare for a championship match as opposed to another match?
At the end of the day, we know what's on the line. It's a big match. It's the a trophy we've yet to get our hands on is at stake, and that does mean a lot, and that will certainly be at least in the back of our minds. But we know there's a bit more on the line. But it's a 90-minute game, potentially more if needed, right? But it's an opportunity to play one last time in front of our fans, and we just want to enjoy it. We can get these champs home often, able to have that opportunity. So that's really our mindset. It's preparing the same way we've done, doing the work we need to do, but ultimately going out there and trusting in what's made us good all year long.
Both these teams know each other. They've played each other so many times. Like, how does it really work when you are trying to prepare against Forge? Like I said, they know all about you. You know all about them. How does that make it different? What kind of challenges and how do you handle that?
You're exactly right, because we play each other. Each team plays 4 times over the course of a year. You get to know each other well, and we've played plenty of big games against Forge in the past. The coaching staff and the technical team are doing their parts to find ways that we can exploit some of those weaknesses or be prepared against their strengths, and those are the things we do every single game. Of course, we know Forge. I mean, we only played them a couple of weeks ago to be able to host this match in the first place. We know a lot about each other, and it's just going to come down to the little details on Saturday.
Speaking about little details, I always really enjoy whenever I watch Cavalry and Forge, the home field advantage factor. I mean, when you go to Tim Hortons Field, you have to contend with the artificial turf, the wind, the biting cold coming in from Lake Ontario. And adversely, you guys have home field advantage this time around. How do you feel that playing at Atco Field will help? I mean, you guys know the natural grass surface probably better than they do, but what other factors may tilt in Cavalry's favor?
You bring up a good point, where it really is kind of a back and forth, and the home team, it's tough. It's always a challenging game to be the away team. So having that home field advantage, although it doesn't guarantee anything, it's certainly a big plus. And that is why, obviously, our grass, I mean, the reality is we're in November, not in the pristine condition it was in the summer, which is the reality of playing football in Canada this time. But the biggest thing is playing in front of fans, right? We have, an incredible atmosphere. Atco Field is a really special place, and to be able to have the support of our fans backing us the whole way through, that atmosphere all game long is massive, especially in a championship game.
How do you rate your performance this year? And was there any kind of individual goal, something you set for yourself? I want to get better at doing this or whatever it would be. And did you have a goal like that? And if you did, do you think you achieved it?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I think that the simple answer is always, always, always trying to improve. And, I think every single player would say that. And me personally, I was really, really happy. And this is it's cliche, but it's true. It's a team effort to be very good defensively. And, we conceded the fewest goals over the course of the season. We had the most clean sheet things to check off. Those are those goals I always have, always wanting to be the best defensive team. So really pleased with that. Again, that goes the defenders in front of me. When got a guy like Dan Klomp, the Tom Fields, you've seen Eric Hobbs, our fullbacks. These guys are putting in a lot of work for me. So really pleased about that. But to bring it back around, I mean, whatever I can do to support the team. And a big part of the way we've wanted to play lately is being really brave possession, building out of the back. And I think that's a strength of mine. And that's something that has led to a lot of really good moments for us as a team. Goalkeeping, I can go on and on about all the things you want to be able to do. It's a unique position in that way. But ultimately, quite pleased with what we keep as a defensive unit, first and foremost, but as a team. And, hopefully we can keep building on that for the last game of the season and then beyond.
Was getting an assist on your list of was that on a list of achievements you wanted to get this year?
God, that's been on my list of achievements since I started playing professionally. And it took me something like 150 odd games for Cavalry to finally get that done.
It was a pretty good goal. We talked about it a lot last week. Toby had a lot of work to do, but it starts with your ball forward. So kudos.
Yeah.
For that.
Thank you. And exactly what you said. I mean, Toby had so much work to do, but it's something we practiced, and I know it's credit to Toby because he had a lot of work to make sure the assist became an assist and not just a good pass.
Being in year 6 of this league now, the number of players that have been with their club since day one, it's getting smaller and smaller, right? Which is understandable. You're within that small group. So I wanted to ask you, as a veteran member of both Cavalry, but also the CPL in general, I mean, who do you look for guidance? I mean, is it Tommy? Is it Nick? Or is there anyone else within the organization that you go to in these instances where you have a question to ask?
It's a really good point, and a great question. I think, for it's sometimes it's a bit surreal to look around the locker room and go, yeah, I'm 10 years older than a lot of these guys now, and you still in your mind you're still always the young guy, I think, in a lot of ways, but that's shifting. But what we've been able to do at this club, which has been special, and we've had guys who were my captains when I was playing the team the first couple of years, progress into different roles, whether that's, Nick going and now being an assistant coach, Mason, someone who played directly in front of me, back, Tom and his staff who, have been many of whom have been here since day one, but even if they haven't, are leaders and experienced heads in the locker room. So it's a variety. It's kind of leadership by committee in that way. I'm really fortunate to have that experience and knowledge around me because I'm still learning as I go too, of course. And to have all of those names we said and more, my teammates are the same. There's so many guys with tons of experience. It really is something that you're able to learn from all the time. I'm one of the more experienced heads in the locker room now, and I'm just trying to pay that forward to the next group of guys coming through.
No matter what happens in this game this weekend, you guys are going back to CONCACAF. How does that feel after getting, a taste of it this year, playing those matches against Orlando?
It feels great. I think we said it as a team at the beginning of the year. We said our goal was to get back into CONCACAF, and there are a couple of different ways to do that, right? The North Star Shield is option one. We weren't able to do that. Winning the Canadian Championship is another way. We weren't able to do that. Now we have an opportunity to win a trophy. Of course, with Forge qualifying, it automatically secures our spot, much like what happened last year, the final between us two teams again. So yeah, I mean, to be able to play in the continental competition like CONCACAF, it's an incredible experience. I think we, as young football fans, I grew up in the Champions League. I mean, I still do our Confederation's version of the Champions League, and to be able to play and test yourselves against the best teams in the Confederation is it's what you want to be doing, right? Last year, that taste against Orlando to play against such a high quality team was incredible, and we just want more of that. So it's a great first step for us. It's nice that that's been locked in, but we obviously have have a major goal that we're still focused on achieving this weekend.
So we know that it's most likely going to be a sellout this Saturday. It looks like tickets are going super fast, if it's not already sold out. What do you think a match like this will do for Cavalry's overall support in Calgary and the fandom? And do you have a message for fans who are going to this match who maybe haven't been to Spruce Meadows for a Cavalry game before?
First thing I would say, the message is, to those who haven't been, it really is a special place to be. I think in terms of a sporting experience, but especially obviously for a soccer experience, it's unmatched really in this country in a lot of ways. Spruce Meadows is a really beautiful place to be. Our stadium has that intimate feel that is really hard to replicate. And it's just an amazing atmosphere. I'm so privileged as a Calgary boy. I get to play in that experience, right? Every single game is really special. I'm getting to do this in my backyard, right? So it's an awesome place for those who haven't been there yet, and maybe going for the first time this weekend. I know for a fact the atmosphere is going to be incredible. We're going to do our very best to put on a show and make sure the fans are able to celebrate all game long. But yeah, it really is. It is something special. And the message I would say just to all our fans is thank you for the support all year long. Again, it's been a lot of ups and downs this year, but we've kept going. The fans have had our back the whole way through, and now we get one opportunity season to do it all together.
Best of luck on Saturday. I'll be there, and I'm sure you guys are going to have a great game.
Thank you, and thanks again for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
But yeah, best of luck, and thanks again for doing this.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks again to Marco Carducci for doing the interview with us, and it was a really good chat. And yeah, I would say long overdue. It seems crazy we didn't have him on all this time, but he's always a very thoughtful, well-spoken person when it comes to interviews. So yeah, it's good to have him on.
For sure, yeah, he's definitely classy, isn't he? I think Marco really has done a good job of being a leader for Cavalry, both on and off the pitch. He leads by example. He's consistently been an incredibly good goalkeeper, and he's also, carried the responsibility of being like almost a symbol for the team off the pitch. He represents the club very well and with a lot of professionalism, such as he did in this interview. So thanks again, Marco, for coming on. And no, I'm excited to see how he and his colleagues do this Saturday.
Let's just speculate here a little bit, Scott. Do you have any thoughts about what you are expecting in this match? Like, I'm not necessarily asking you to predict a score, but you can if you want to. But yeah. But I think, what do you expect in this match to see?
So I'm expecting a 1-0 win for Cavalry, which is a repeat of their game 2 weeks ago. And here's why. Cavalry hasn't been the most offensively productive team this year, as we've talked about. They only scored 39 goals in 28 regular season matches, but they have had the league's best defense, only conceding 27 goals in those 28 games. So I think they're going to be able to hold Forge off, but I think they're only going to manage to find the net once. If I had to predict, who is going to score it, it would probably be either Toby Warshevsky, their scoring leader, who has gotten 13 goals so far this season and is the CPL's top scorer. But I'd also think that Ali Musi has a good chance of scoring. If you go back all the way to 2018, Ali Musi scores in big games. He scored in last year's final. He scored in the PDL final in 2018. He's a big game player. So I predict that either he or Warshevsky will find the net for Cavalry, and they'll win 1-0.
Yeah, well, I think right now, I also, think Cavalry is going to win this match. I think the final score is going to be 2-0 for Cavalry. And what I think is going to happen is I think it'll be 1-0. And I think that when Forge has like less than 10 minutes to go and they're literally throwing the kitchen sink, trying to do everything they do to break Cavalry down, something will happen and they'll, on a quick counter, they'll get a second goal and that'll wrap it up. So I'm going to go a little bit different than you. I'm going to say 2-0, and I'm not going to predict any goal scorers, but I will say one thing. I would agree that Toby and Ali Musi would be the obvious choices, but I'm still rooting for Schmidt-Schoen to somehow score a goal. He would be the least obvious player probably on Cavalry to score, but after we interviewed him there a couple of months ago and how badly he wanted to score a goal, I just kind of in the back of my mind, I'd be like, he hasn't scored for Cavalry yet. Wouldn't this be just the perfect time for him to pull that off? But that's more like wishful thinking probably than anything else.
That would be quite the story. Absolutely. So, we've put it out there. We've made our predictions. Before we kind of move on, I would like to bring up one player from Forge, actually, who I think Cavalry really is going to have to nullify if they want to be the better team. And that's Alessandro Hojabrpour, who once again was huge for Forge in their win against Atletico. 2 big blocks, or I think like another goal line clearance, right? He made that header off the line when Cavalry played Forge 2 weeks ago, and he did something similar against Atletico. He's key for Forge's defense, but he's even more important when they win possession back, because he's like their Schmidt-Schoen. Like, he's the guy who sits in front of defense and reads the game and gives players a passing outlet and sprays balls out wide, plays through balls to forwards and wingers. Bobby Smirniotis compared him to Rodri from Manchester City, who of course just won the Ballon d'Or the other week. But as a Bundesliga fan myself, I'd compare him to Granit Xhaka from Bayer Leverkusen, who was a major reason why Leverkusen went unbeaten in both the Bundesliga and the German Cup last year. I'm gonna put it out there that Cavalry, is really gonna have to try and figure out how to stop or limit the impact of Hojabrpour if they're gonna win this game.
Yeah, he's had a pretty fantastic season. No argument there. Yeah, so it's going to be a good one. 1 p.m. At Spruce Meadows. I am going to be gutted. I won't be there. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to find some coverage in the U.S. I heard that there's a channel called Fox Soccer Plus, which exists, and I'm going to see if I can track that down when I'm down in the States on Saturday, or else I'm going to have to figure out how to get a VPN to work or something. But yeah, it's going to be a good one, and we'll talk more about it next week, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Can't wait. And before we move on from Cavalry, I think, Marco did mention this in the interview, but we did forget to throw out there before running it that as a result of it being Forge in the final, Cavalry is already qualified for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, regardless of what happens on Saturday. And the draw for that intercontinental tournament is on December 10th.
Yeah, he did mention they're excited about it. And weirdly enough, this season is going to end here this weekend, but the CPL draft, I think, is on right at the beginning of December, and the Champions Cup draw is December 10th. So there's going to be a few more things still happening in the next few weeks after this final's over.
Yeah, and it's going to be really exciting to see which team Cavalry faces. Last season, they qualified for this tournament, and they were drawn to play Orlando City, and it was a really tough fixture because it was right at the beginning of Cavalry's preseason, and they hadn't even played anybody in exhibition before this, so they didn't look that great. But they were taking on a really strong MLS team that was coming toward the end of their preseason, so we're much fitter and sharper. But having been through that experience already once before, you have to imagine that Cavalry will know a bit better what to expect, regardless of who they're playing.
This is Kendall Showers, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So shortly before we recorded this episode, Jason, we got a press release from the Calgary Wild that they have announced their second player signing after announcing Barkunda Mutaj as the first player signing just a few weeks ago. Player number 2 is New Zealand center back Michaela Moore. A little bit more about Michaela. She is, as I mentioned, from New Zealand. She's played for the New Zealand women's national team for more than 10 years. She has 65 caps to her name. She's 28 years old. Most recently has been playing in Scotland with Glasgow City FC. But before that, she played for Liverpool as well as FC Köln in the Bundesliga, and one of that club's rival teams, MSV Duisburg. So lots of European experience, and similar to Mutaj, coming to Calgary likely in the prime of her career, at the age of 28.
Yeah, when I think of somebody who plays in that position, like 28, you're just hitting that prime time. So yeah, I would fully expect that she's going to be, a leader at the back. If this is sort of an indication of what we can expect from, bringing in non-Canadian players, I say it's a pretty good first step. That's for sure.
Yep. Strong start. Some big name announcements already from the Wild. So excited to see who's next.
Hi, this is Miguel Da Rocha, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Okay, let's move over to some post-secondary soccer, and we'll start with the Mount Royal Cougars men's team. They were matched up against UBC Thunderbirds this past weekend for the Canada West title, and that match was in Vancouver, but that was kind of a bit of a tough ask, I think, playing UBC at home. So they did lose 1-0.
Yeah, really unfortunate for the Cougars, but a tough task to take on the Thunderbirds in Vancouver. I read a game recap. It was apparently pouring rain the whole time. 1-0, so it was clearly a close game. But unfortunately, MRU wasn't able to retain their conference title from last year. I noticed that it was a Calgarian who scored for UBC in this one.
Yeah, it was Brennan Fierst. UBC has historically always had a few Calgarians on the roster, someone like Sebastian Zitkowski from last year, but he was the one who got the winner.
Yeah, in the 54th minute, and then UBC was able to hold off any of MRU's attacks for the remainder of the match. So it's too bad that MRU isn't able to get the repeat. But despite the loss, they still get to go to the national championships, which kick off pretty soon out in Ontario.
Yeah, their first match is Thursday morning, 11:30 Calgary time, and they're going to play the University of Montreal Carabins, which I believe are the second-ranked team nationally. So definitely a tough opponent to start things off.
Definitely, yeah. Mount Royal's ranked 7th, but of course, because they lost the Canada West final, they have the tougher draw for the quarterfinals. So hopefully they could make the upset happen. I have to confess, I don't know too much about Montreal or the Carabins, but obviously you can't be that bad if you're ranked second in the nation. So will be a tough battle for the Cougars.
For sure. And I did want to mention too that these games will be available online, for free on the CBC Sports website.
So just rounding out the rest of the teams at nationals this weekend, we've got, of course, MRU and UBC from Canada West, University of New Brunswick and St. FX from Atlantic Conference, McGill and Montreal from Quebec, York and Ontario Tech from the Ontario League.
My name is Mo Gander, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, now let's talk about the Dinos women's team. They were also in action this past weekend. Canada West Championships were hosted at McMahon Stadium here in Calgary. Despite having that home field advantage, unfortunately, the Dinos weren't able to make it happen, losing to University of Victoria in their first match 1-0 after an early goal for the Vikes that knocked them out of gold medal contention.
Their next match was on Saturday afternoon, and they were playing Trinity Western with having a spot in the national championship on the line. And they also lost that when it was final score was 3-2.
Yeah, I read the game recap on the Dinos website. It was a really back and forth match. It seemed like, unfortunately, the Dinos weren't able to make it happen. And as a result, their season came to an end. Bitter way to end what was a really, really solid season overall, after finishing first in the Prairie Division. But, considering the continuity that this Dinos team will probably have, with most of the players likely playing for Blizzard again in the spring and summertime, you have to assume that they're going to be pretty strong in 2025 as well, although they are losing some key players.
Yeah, the three graduating players, I know you put some notes here in advance to sort of make mention of them. Rachel Barlow, Jaden Berg, and Jade Kao. Those are pretty significant players on this team. But I guess, on the other hand, they have had a few first-year players really step up this year. So I guess that's just the cycle of university soccer, right?
Right, it is. And when I interviewed her a few weekends ago, I did ask their scoring leader, Grace Moore, if she was going to be back, and she does have one more year of eligibility. So she might be back. She has been at the university, I believe, for 5 years, but because her first year was that COVID year, it didn't count towards her eligibility. And then we have to recall that the player that would have been their captain this year, Sophia Di Giacomo, was out with a knee injury, right? An ACL tear, I believe. So she might be back as well.
This is Mila Schneider, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So we thought we'd go south of the border to talk a little bit of post-secondary soccer as well. In the NCAA, their playoffs have started, and there are a lot of Calgarians down playing on scholarship. We've made a point of talking about a couple teams in particular, the University of Maine and the University of Memphis. Both have strong Calgarian contingents. So we thought we'd just provide a quick update about what those teams are up to right now.
Yeah, so let's start with the University of Maine, which has a ton of Calgarian players. I think it was 7, wasn't it, on their roster?
Uh-huh.
They won their conference regular season championship for the first time, that being the America East Conference. And we'll begin the playoff tournament tonight, taking on UMass Lowell. Yeah, and the winner of that will take on the winner of another game between the Binghamton Bearcats and the New Hampshire Wildcats. So a battle of the cats to see.
Real cat fight.
Real cat fight, exactly. So in terms of other things we can mention about Maine and their Calgary connections, the siblings, Mila Schneider and Emma Schneider, they both got some accolades this year. Mila was named to the first team all-conference, was also an all-academic, and then Emma was named to the second team all-conference. So now talking about University of Memphis Tigers, they won their conference regular season championship again, that being the American Athletic Conference. And they've actually already begun their playoff tournament. They defeated Tulsa 4-2 on Monday in the quarterfinals. And Calgarian Anna Hauer found her name on the score sheet.
Yeah, she scored the first goal in the match. Their next match is the semifinal where they're going to play the Rice University Owls.
Rice University Owls, yeah. And that university has a bit of a connection to our podcast because Calgarian Kaylee Books, who was on our podcast several months ago, that's her alma mater.
And I just want to mention that Anna Hauer was second team all conference this year. So kudos to her. Another strong season for her 2 years in, and she's continuing to advance in her career.
Yeah. She had a great freshman year last year and has carried that into her second year after spending the summer back in Calgary. Some really strong games from her. And the Tigers have a great social media presence, and you can catch some of her goals if you follow them on X.
One more thing, I was looking at the lineups the last couple of games, and I haven't seen Izzy Monk's name in there. So I'm actually haven't done the research, but I have a feeling she might be hurt because I can't imagine she wouldn't be playing in these matches.
I can't either. Yeah, you'd think that she'd be pretty much the first, if not the second player on the team sheet most weeks.
So anyway, that might be something I might check out. I might have to check out going forward. And if there's any listeners out there who have any updates, we'd be glad to hear them.
I'm Shamit Shom. This is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, so we wanted to end our episode this week by just highlighting a couple of players from the St. Trojans who received some pretty impressive recognitions after their 2024 ACAC seasons. Jason, you found this earlier and added it to our script. Some familiar names appearing on the individual award list this year.
Probably the biggest individual accolade went to former podcast guest Megan Wiebe of the St. Trojans. She won the CCA Women's Player of the Year. Kudos to her.
Yeah, Megan Wiebe, who set a new scoring record for St. last year. Don't believe she equaled her total, but she still had an incredibly prolific season this fall. 14 goals and 10 assists for a league-leading 38 points this season, which, of course, helped guide the Trojans to an unbeaten 12-0 regular season record. She's really rewritten the Trojans' record books when it comes to goals and assists, and she's now the Trojans' all-time goals leader with 53, which actually places her third in conference history on the women's side.
Yeah, that's a pretty fantastic number. A couple of other accolades we want to mention is on the women's side, there were two players with Calgary connections that were announced as being all Canadian. One was, as you may well guess, Megan Wiebe, and the other one is Harleen Singh, and she plays for Cano College. And I have to admit, Scott, I don't know much about her. I know she is from Calgary. I ran across her name, I think, when I was doing some research about opponents that St. was going to have to face in the championship tournament. But kudos to both of them.
Yeah, and then on the men's side, a similar accolade for Trojans player Teshlok. I'm not sure if I said that correct. David, who had a great season.
Yeah, and he was also announced as an All-Canadian. So, yeah. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. On our website, we also have links where you can buy Scott's book about Calgary soccer history online. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media using Twitter or Instagram or Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.